The hours for the wellness center are set based on budget, are set based on usage patterns, are set based on staff timing when we get there. So right now we're open from 6 in the morning till 9 at night, Monday through Thursday, 6 to 6 on Fridays, and 9 to 4 on the weekends. We're open more hours than we're closed generally, and the staff that works there does monitor the building, and they are trained in CPR and AEDs, the people that do work at the desk. So we do have some limited training for them, and being able to call 911 or being able to administer CPR is something that they're able to do. Other than that, the Recreation Commission has talked about hours before. It's a budget and a usage issue. From the hours of 8:15 to 9 o'clock, we have two people come in that want to work out, and we close at 9 o'clock. And when you move it from 7:30 to 9 o'clock, there's maybe 6 people that come in, and it's the same average people that are coming in at those hours. So we didn't have like an outcry of anybody coming in and saying, hey, we wanted to be open till 10, and it just seemed like 9 o'clock was a good budgetary time for us and a good numbers, as far as numbers go, the time for us to close. And we have the same numbers on the pool. That's why we've gone to the hours that we have at the pool. We noticed that the families are leaving at 7 and 7:30, and it made it a better time to close at 8 o'clock and be able to save some of those dollars on the budget.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Does it seem, is it feasible at all to do like a pass card, a swipe card for that? And people have to, maybe people would have to sign a waiver, a safety waiver and things like that. Because I know, especially now with so many evening meetings, my schedule's very dicey, and so it's really hard to get there. And, we can all appreciate, the costs add up for support staff, but it's such a lovely facility that we all contribute a lot to from a tax basis, that it would be nice to have a little bit more flexibility with the hours.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the overall picture, there's probably lots of different options to look at as far as how the building can be open and accessed. I want to say that we talked about it at the city commission level 2 years ago, and it was kind of not looked at in favor because the community center is in a neighborhood. It's somewhere where there's houses on all sides of the building, and people coming in and out of the building at all hours of the night could possibly disturb the neighbors, and it wasn't something at that time that I necessarily was in favor of. At 2 o'clock in the morning, someone going into the wellness center and using the building and getting in and out of their vehicles or
the other
walking
issue
there.
we looked at in that respect, and I know you know this because when you're there, you're nearer to the closing time, but just as the example that was mentioned, it comes down to, is it worth keeping the building open additional hours for 2 people to use it? Because the air conditioning must be on, or the heat must be on. We generally have the showers open. This has been reviewed ad nauseum. And the fitness center is open, if you think about it. It's open 12 hours a day or more.
More.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
15 hours a day.
if I may,
Except for the weekends.
I was part of the Recreation Commission. We were looking at having it actually a separate interest where we would have a slide card in there, and the cost was huge, astronomical.
It's a liability issue.
And
It's
plus
a different
liability,
facility.
and
Yeah,
I think we are a recreation facility.
you change the scope of the building when you make it a 24-hour facility or major extended hours into the night, really, what the building becomes. But again, that's a budget.
Well, maybe it's something the Recreation Commission can review again.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Other items?
Don't worry, my voice is here.
You have to come to the microphone for the TV.
Darrell Bridges, 34 Kensington, 2 items. The first, could the council look at an aspect of putting a do not block intersection at Kensington Boulevard? Traffic coming around in the morning and at evening backs all the way up, and Michigan drivers don't generally follow the protocol of leaving intersections open, so it kind of takes you a while to get out at that intersection. Just something that you can have on the record to look at.
So say that again, I'm sorry.
The intersection at Kensington Boulevard coming out onto Main Street,
Uh-huh.
8 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, you can't get out because the traffic will come around, they'll get stopped at the light for at the service drive, and it'll back up, and they do not let you out.
The Main Street.
Yes, the Main Street
I
backs
got
up,
it.
yes.
Okay.
So if you could look at the aspect of do not block the intersection,
Okay.
that would make the residents on Kensington probably a little bit more happy because it doesn't take you 2 or 3 lights before you can get out. The other item is that I kind of noticed the construction on Maywood, and it looks as though all of the sidewalks have been done. Was that something that's normal process, or was that a add-on for that particular street that no other street was able to acquire?
Sherry, you want to address the sidewalk
Yes.
issue?
Yes, when the, during the infrastructure program, when the streets are assessed by the engineers, the sidewalks are replaced completely if they are over 60% that need to be replaced. And then you have to factor in the number that also would be taken out for like the sewer leads. There's usually 3 or 4
Right.
sometimes that have to be replaced. So it is based on a percentage of sidewalk flags that would have to be replaced.
And that was the only one in the city of Pleasant Ridge to
No,
date?
no.
Has,
No, Maywood, wasn't
No,
it?
we've
No,
done,
what-
we did, Kemper, Elm,
Part of Elm
Camberton.
Park, not my part of Elm Park.
right, West Elm Park. We've done a few others, but no, not the majority.
and what's the change order cost for that? Because that's not getting picked up by the residents, right?
Yes, it's part of the infrastructure
It's
program.
not being picked up by the individual
Individual,
Oh, I'm
residents on
sorry.
that street.
No, it's being paid for under the infrastructure improvement program millage, and then the other funding that we add each year to that. Yes.
Yeah, Jennifer. He was unemployed for 57 months.
Okay.
It was.
Sherry's looking at another program for a systematic replacement of sidewalks throughout the city to be, determined in the near-term future as to how that might be structured and how that might be paid for.
Okay, well, the logic would kind of dictate, we don't have a general contractor who goes out and inspects city sidewalks then, I take it.
We do not.
Okay,
You mean an employee?
yeah, who
Yeah.
literally, okay, so.
I mean, we can ask our DPW employees to do that, which is what we do if we have an area that somebody calls and says, I have this area that has a huge trip hazard. Under today's ordinance, if we find that and it's identified, we have to notify you that you must replace it.
Because I do a lot of walking, and
Yes.
there are a lot of slabs that need to be replaced, and
I agree with you.
it's it's very difficult to take walks when some slabs are 2 to 3 inches uplifted, and you kind of see that those streets have already been done, and you kind of scratch your head to say, well, if this street was completely done, sidewalks don't deteriorate in a 1-year time frame. So it's just that we missed the ball on the aspect of constant review of those particular items on an ongoing basis.
Well, I don't think I would categorize it as missed the ball on it. We do replace some sidewalks every year, and like I said, it's usually when it's brought to my attention that there's this trip hazard, we need to go take a look at it. And then also, the police and DPW are out on the streets if they see something that's, identified, like a tree has lifted up a sidewalk. So, we do have ongoing maintenance every year for sidewalks, but we don't have a formal program every year.
Okay, and the building right there on the corner of Kensington and Main, the banking.
Multi-banks?
Yeah, can you just take a look at all of those? Because
Yes.
it appears as though everywhere where there's a tree planted, it is uprooted, and there's kind of a shift in the sidewalk area.
Sure.
On
absolutely.
Woodward or on Kensington?
It's on Woodward. It's-
Woodward is rough there.
Yes, absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Everywhere there's a tree, it's uplifted.
They did have a maintenance company come and cut the lawn.
Yes,
Clean it.
after they were cited, right?
I don't know if they were cited or not, but I assume so.
Sherry told us they were cited at the last.
Sherry, were they cited?
They were, yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Well, as you know, I can sometimes be long-winded, but it's late at night, so I'll be very brief tonight.
Thank you.
My first point that I wanted to bring up is at the end of the July meeting, there appears to have been some discussion that people felt that I should have come back and perhaps apologized to some people. If that is the case, it probably means that I didn't do a good job of communicating what I meant to communicate. And I'll start first by saying to Sherry that, you know, when I talked about certain items, if you felt that I was not believing your word, that wasn't really what I was talking about. I never meant to malign or say anything bad about that. I was simply indicating that it was not in the city's best interest to approve a contract that only had verbal representations behind it, and that we should have something from the state as to what that contract is or what that agreement with the EBIP grant was. And I understand that we've actually received something at this point.
Actually,
So,
actually, I have one for you.
thank you.
You can pick it up whenever you're ready.
Second thing is I just wanted to also apologize if anyone on the city commission was upset by my use of the word deceiving the residents of Pleasant Ridge or deceiving the state. But if you go back to the May meeting and you look at the May meeting, there are at least a dozen references throughout the May meeting, 4 or 5 of them by Mr. Commissioner Rubino, and a couple of them by Ms. Mayor Costelli, that specifically said that this was going to be a feasibility study. You know, and I think by now we've all acknowledged that the state does not pay 100% on feasibility studies. So I think the issue simply comes down to it was probably a poor choice of words on the part of the commission to continue to refer to it as a feasibility study when it's something between a feasibility study and a merger study. So from those ends of it, I'd like to apologize for that. I think we need to respect each other. I wasn't trying to put harsh blame on anyone. I was just simply trying to state that the state says feasibility studies are paid at 25%, and anyone that left the May meeting thought that we were agreeing to do a feasibility study. And there's really a dichotomy in the two. They can't both be true. Either we're not doing a feasibility study and we're getting paid 100%, or we're doing a feasibility study and we're only getting reimbursed 25%. So that is the first point. The second issue I'd like to deal with is just a very quick point on the water. At the end of the June meeting, there were a couple of statements that were really sort of incorrect or partial. One of them was that a woman stepped up after I talked and asked if the method that we use for billing for water is a method used by other cities, and the comment was made at the meeting that this method is the most common method used by most cities. Of the 14 cities that are associated with either SACWA or 12-town drains, which is our Oakland County Sewer Authority, there are 14 different ones that use the same water source and sources that we use. There are only 3 other cities that bill similar to what Pleasant Ridge is billing. 10 other cities that are doing some sort of hybrid model, or in the case of Berkeley, doing the exact opposite of what Pleasant Ridge is doing. So Berkeley is at one end, charging all the fixed expenses separate. Pleasant Ridge is at the other end, charging all the fixed expenses on the cost of the water. And most of the other cities are hybrid models somewhere in between the two. The result, unfortunately, is that Pleasant Ridge's model has brought about a 40% increase in water costs in 3 years. I've been told over and over that it's the most equitable and fair manner, but the result of it is that even low water users in this city have seen a 40% increase in the cost of their water in the last 3 years, when inflation is only 7%. Now, high water users feel more pain because a 40% increase on a $2,000 bill is a lot more than a 40% increase on a $100 bill. So you're getting a lot of flack and a lot of kickback from people that are using more water. So that was one of the issues. The other concept that I did want to bring up is that when people were asking at the June meeting where all the costs are coming from and what's going on and why the increases, there were primarily 3 statements made by the various people. They indicated, one, an 8% increase in Detroit water costs. But those of us that know the water budget know an 8% increase in Detroit water costs, because it's such a small part of the budget, is only a $1 increase when it comes to the 1,000 cubic feet of water. The other was an increase in SOAR fees, which is realistic, and there was some, especially in the rain runoff costs. And the last one was increases in setting aside emergency reserves, which to me appear to be just about $25,000 out of a $1.25 million budget. So I guess my point that I simply wanted to make is that the one primary factor for the rate increase was not mentioned to the citizens, and that was that the city is forecasting an 8% reduction in water purchases. The fact that if they had forecast this year the same amount of water sales as they forecast last year, instead of having a 12% increase, we'd be looking at under a 6% increase. So the city is obviously anticipating that we are going to be seeing decreases in water consumption. And when you take a large amount of fixed expenses and you put them on a smaller base of water consumption, it raises the cost of the water. So I just wanted to bring to the attention of everyone something that was not mentioned at the meeting last June, and that was that the bulk of the increase in the costs come from the fact that we are anticipating a decrease in consumption within the city. And that's it. I apologize if I offended anyone at the June meeting. It was not my purpose. My purpose is primarily to get rid of misinformation and miscommunication. I think the more people know, the more transparent our information is, the better off everyone is. There's a gentleman that we're here that doesn't understand the water bill, and most people don't understand the water bill. You know, it's a complicated bill, but I think we can do a better job of educating our citizens and making information available to them. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I have one question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
My wife attended your presentation in the park the other day, and she came home to me extremely angry, asking why have you received all the information that we've given you? I mean, anything that you requested, we've given it to you? I mean, I heard a comment made that we aren't being transparent by giving you all the information that you requested, and I'm thinking, and I came back to City Commission, and I asked Ann, and I asked Jason, and I asked everybody, and is there something I'm missing? I mean, because I'm fully for transparency, and so I want to make sure that every information that you've requested, you received. If it isn't, then there's something wrong, and so I'm asking you that question.
I think your wife took some statements as information that was requested, where the statements were made that we don't understand where some of the costs are coming from. Particularly the administrative service charges. That there's this bulk cost of $179,600 that just sits there, yet as a business owner, I look at the water SOAR budget and I see all kinds of administrative service charges within the budget separate from the administrative service charges.
Okay, but you have received all the information that you've requested?
Yes.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think anything has been withheld from me personally that I've requested.
And I never took any personal offense to any of your comments. Just to let you know that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I would just say to Commissioner Bushy's point, the one part of the conversation on last week regarding the water rates that Mrs. Bushy attended did concern the breakdown of the the administrative service fees, that breakdown. We had a commission workshop yesterday on the water rates. There was enormous discussion, not entirely consensus, but hopefully it's a conversation that we will continue as a commission. One thing that was very helpful that Sherry provided and Scott provided that I feel I was negligent in not providing at this workshop, or the conversation we had with residents last week, was that breakdown of the administrative service charges. In our conversation yesterday, there's a clear breakdown of those charges. I feel it was my duty to provide that previously, and I feel any miscommunication was really due to that, me not providing that, having that information handy when it was available. So I didn't want to give the misperception to your wife or anyone out there that I was accusing anyone of being withholding information. I take responsibility for not having that information when, if we're going to have a discussion for water, then I should have had that information.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I could just add, I think Commissioner Krzyjak is taking on more than you should. It is not the elected official's responsibility to have that kind of document in your possession at all times. The most appropriate thing for you to do is to refer people to the city administration, and I am happy, be it, if it's easily accessible, be it under FOIA, those are documents that are public documents and are kept at City Hall.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing if I can. When it comes to the water bills, I'm in total agreement with them being too high. We were gone for 2 months, come home, and our water bill was high, really, really high. And my wife yelled at me, why is my bill so high? Like I'm the one that sent her the bill, because she had nobody else to yell at and I happened to be there. The discussion we had last night was quite intense. We were looking for all kinds of alternative ways to try to get some justification to changes. We've come up with some ideas, but we met with the auditors last night, who kind of told us we have to follow certain rules from the state. We can't change certain things, but we're not done with that. We're looking at different alternatives of how we can make those modifications, because the bills on my block ran between $500 to $3,000. That's a lot of money for people to pay. Now, one of the things that maybe a lot of people don't know, if your bill is really high, you can make agreement with the city to pay it over 3 months without penalty or interest. And we asked Sherry last night if she'd put that on the water bill so people know that. Because one of my neighbors, who is a single mom, said to me, Frankie, there's no way I can pay this. And I asked Sherry about it and said, there's got to be something we need to do. And then she said, well, we do allow that. So I went to see her yesterday and told her, you can now amortize this over 3 months without penalty or interest. Whatever agreement you make, you just have to stick to it. If you don't stick to it, then I can't do anything about it. So, but I agree with the water. I think there's a lot of things you don't understand about the water system. I know you think you understand it all. When we had the meeting last night,
but I'll say I could inform some people.
Yeah, I understand, but let me just
Information
finish.
they're unaware of.
Okay. But there's a lot of part, and Jason and Ann found that out last night when the auditors talked about a lot of things that they didn't realize about the water. But we're looking for alternative ways to make these changes so that we can lower it if it's possible. There are some alternatives you may look at doing, like the gas company provides a monthly fee. You can do a budget plan. If during the cold parts of the year you pay more on your water bill, just like you do on your gas. During the summertime, my gas bill's $18, but I pay $300 because when the winter comes, I don't have that huge bill, and that what we're trying to do is eliminate that big
spreads
chunk.
the cost, but doesn't lower the bill.
I know, but it also makes it easier for people to afford it. Instead of coming out with a large chunk, at least they can amortize it. That's not the solution, but it is something we can do in the interim while we're trying to resolve this issue. All of us feel strongly about the water because we pay high bills too. It's not something that we get free and you pay for.
I appreciate what the commission's doing and looking into it, because I think it does have to be done. I think it's clear that the current billing structure will yield increases of 10 to 15% a year going forward as people continue to cut back on their water consumption. Now, we have these fixed costs, and if anything came out of the meeting last Wednesday, it's that the residents of Pleasant Ridge are fairly intelligent, and when they came into the meeting unaware, but had someone spend time with them and go through the entire water budget and identify the different areas and where the numbers come from, and that all of the numbers are legitimate numbers, and whether we pay them in the water bill or whether we pay them in the property tax, wherever we pay them, the money is not being grabbed or stolen. It's just a matter of where it's allocated and how it's allocated that separates the towns from one town to another town to another town in how their water bills are structured.
Well, a lot of the local communities that you're speaking about have added things to their tax roll to offset
Correct.
their water costs. The problem with that is, you can control your water to some point by being able to turn your water off. When you put it on your taxes, whether you're home or not, whether you turn the water on or not, if you take 2 months and go away, you're still going to pay that same amount of money. So you have to be real careful when you tell people that we're now going to put it on your tax roll as a millage, and it's going to be against the cost, and then it's based on the taxable value of your home, which you're going to pay from now on, even if you don't use any water or you do.
Or an example we looked at last night, and the city administration is going to develop further examples based on our questions. We looked at 5 homes. One of them happened to be mine. On the basis of taking the fixed charges and counting the number of water meters and dividing those fixed charges equally among everybody, my water bill for my last bill would have gone down almost $500. At the same time, there was a house that has a minimum bill, and that person's water bill would have gone up about $100, would have doubled. So, the bills have to be paid. Really, when you look at the difference in Berkeley versus us or somebody else versus us, it's how are we allocating who's paying that. And there are some people who say that the fixed costs ought to be borne by 1,150 of our favorite houses, ignoring the commercials, because I don't know how many of those are, but let's say 1,200 total. And others that would think that equitable is based upon consumption. Those are the competing points of view. And somewhere in between. You put some of it on the tax rolls, you put 12 towns on the tax rolls, then you're paying for 12 towns based upon the value of your house.
Correct.
The one example that we have for 12 towns between flat fee and millage, for my house, flat fee $97. For my house, millage $220. If I'm not mayor, guess which way I vote?
Well, but that $220 brings down your water bill too.
Oh, it does. By
So-
$97. Even factoring in a continued real estate deduction, I'm a loser in that equation. And in the other equation, let's follow the Berkeley model to the best we can. If I probably would go down for a year, $1,400, because I was $500 just for the 1 quarter. But the little old lady with the minimum bill is going to go up $400, $500 a year. Is that fair? I might say yes.
That,
I don't think she would.
that little old lady's bill is going to go up every year going forward by 10 to 15%, and it's gone up 40% in the last 3 years because of the structure. The structure has to be changed, or the bills will continue to rise at the rates they have been rising at.
That's
I have
exactly what we're
never-
looking at.
I have never advocated going totally to the Berkeley model. I have explained the Berkeley model, and I have put expenses in to show what the bills would be with the Pleasant Ridge expenses into a Berkeley model. But I have always advocated a hybrid model somewhere in between, where we move some of the expenses out of the water and sewer fund that we can, and then we go with a number somewhere between 50 and 70% of the fixed expenses remaining on the water, and 20 to 40% actually coming off and going on as a reasonable $50, $60 ready to serve charge with a water charge that's down closer to $60. Water sewer combined charge closer to 60. So ultimately, if we can do it and we can do it well, and we can get people back to the point where they're using some water. There's so many people that are in sticker shock that they have cut back on their water consumption, and it's that decrease in water consumption that is driving up the cost of the fixed expenses on every 1,000 cubic feet of water. Because the fixed expenses every year are increasing, the water consumption is decreasing. When you take increasing expenses and pile them on a smaller
Well, one of the things we
target.
asked Sherry and Scott to take a look at is what is water consumption for the city been for the last 10 years? To see if in fact water consumption is going down.
Well, that would be useful information.
Well,
Another
people
thing-
keep throwing it out there
Right.
like it's fact.
Well,
And I haven't seen
the
anybody,
city this year is forecasting 8% less water.
Sherry?
One thing I would like to add, because I really don't want to debate this again, I'll leave that to you. Fixed costs have not gone up. In fact, the administrative service charges have gone down. So that's incorrect. And, you know, what I have shared with the city commission last night, and I know we're going to do it again, is going to be a fair and accurate accounting of what the city is charging its water customers. But, you know, everybody on this commission understands most of the water billing process, and in all fairness, municipal government financing is different than private business. We have limitations as to what we can do. We have requirements for an enterprise fund, which is what that is. I mean, there's just all different kinds of factors that you must consider before making any change.
And we're in that
So-
process, and we're in that process.
to build
and we're-
water based on taxable value, I mean, that's something you have to consider and talk to your neighbors about. So I think this is gonna continue.
And get them to vote for.
Right. And Mr. Harden, we have reviewed your scenario also, and your fellow commissioners here know that has been part of the process, so we're not ignoring your voice.
Yeah, your comments is part of our study.
So we
Okay.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and I'd like to thank you though, because I think you've really elevated the level of discussion that, you know, because you've helped educate a lot of people on, you know what, these costs are all valid. These aren't just, this isn't some money grab or something like that. There are a lot of very specific things that make up this bill. And then the discussion goes from there. And so thank you
That
very
was
much.
one of the results of the Wednesday meeting. The people that came angry, confused, and upset left understanding that in some form or fashion they have to pay the costs. The only question is what's the best way to structure the costs, and what can prevent the bills from growing as quickly as they currently are growing.
We also have to be careful how we do that because as Sherry said, we have certain rules and regulations we must adhere to.
Well, all the
Otherwise,
towns have
we
the same
found a
rules. And,
violation by the state and then we got a lot of problems.
all the towns have the same rules and regulations, and 8 of the 14 towns are all doing some kind of hybrid model. So legally,
We are
there
looking
has
at it.
to be
All right,
options.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over here.
Just a quick question.
Up here.
related to the
I'm sorry, it's a rule.
I gotta go out there.
Bye.
He gets to
Just a
go.
query from the,
You need to sit on the end.
Strategic.
okay. Just a query regarding the aspect of the installment. You kind of indicated a high bill. What's a high bill that Sherry will consider as an installment plan?
I don't think it doesn't matter what the bill is.
Okay, well,
They'll
you
do
just-
any of them.
Right, you stated a high bill, so I just need clarification. If I go over with $100 bill, can I get it
Yeah.
allocated?
Well, let me just tell you, a high bill is what somebody considers high. If somebody
Okay.
gets a $300 bill, to me, that's high.
Right.
So what I meant
But
by it.
something, Sherry has said any bill
Any
will
bill,
qualify.
and that's what I
Any
wanted
bill.
to
The other
find
thing
out.
that people can do before their bill comes is send money ahead of time. So if you want to go on your own budget plan and you figure you spend $2,000 a year on on water, you can send $175 a month or whatever that math is.
I handle money, I prefer to pay in arrears as
I'm
opposed
I'm just, life is full of options.
The option is to pay in arrears. And I just wanted to confirm if it's any dollar amount that would.
Any dollar amount.
Any dollar amount that you consider high.
Any other matters?
Yeah?
If we talked about the sidewalk, do I still wait to make that motion?
Jay Foreman, 79 Maple Field. I came a couple months ago to ask about a sidewalk on Kemberton between Oakdale and Maple Field. Wanted to see if there had been any information found on that since that time. Any updates?
Sherry,
Well,
does the school district do something? Or
I-
promise to do something?
Yes. The idea of installing a sidewalk on Kemberton between Oakdale and Maple Field was reviewed. I got an estimate for the sidewalk. I discussed it with the city commission. I also contacted the residents in that area that would be immediately impacted. 3 of the residents responded and they are opposed to any sidewalk being installed and have really found no need for it in their opinion. I thought your issue was that because you walk your daughter to school on that street, that you were concerned about the bus stop. And so I contacted the school district, and they are willing to move the bus stop. So, you know, you would not have to walk down that street to get to it. So, although I thought he said that the bus stop was actually at Cambridge and Oakdale.
There is one at Cambridge and Oakdale and one at Oakdale and Kemberton.
Oh, okay, so there's 2 there. So they could move it up to Maple Field. And so that's what I left with the city commission.
Okay. Well, that's a short-term solution for the one aspect of the problem is walking to school. Just me walking to school. There are other families too. There are people that walk their dogs up and down the street, ride their bikes up and down the street. And I do those things as well. I know there are numerous other families that do. I may be the only one that has brought this up recently. I've spoken to a couple neighbors recently and asked them, and they said, oh, I brought this up numerous times. I don't know who that was with or when that was, but I'm not the only person in the city that's concerned about this. So I'm wondering, you know, I think we still need a solution for people that want to walk between these streets, off of Maple Field or onto Maple Field, via Kemberton, instead of going all the way down to Cambridge. What can we do so I don't need to walk in the street with my dog, my kid, on my bike, whatever it is, so my kid can ride around the block on his bike? Not just my kids either, the whole city, or anyone in that area of the neighborhood. So that's more what I'm looking for. I appreciate the movement we've got on the bus pickup. That will definitely help us. But I don't think that's the answer to my overall concern of safety. I'm sorry about these residents that are affected by it, and maybe there's another way to answer this problem. Maybe not a sidewalk on their property, maybe, I don't know what else. There's got to be some other way to do it, or make it work somehow so it's acceptable to everyone. So that's kind of where I was going with that. Thank you for the bus thing, I appreciate it, but I don't feel that really satisfies it. So if there's something more that I can do, if you'd like me to go door to door, I'll do that, and I'll get people writing down their names and saying, I support a sidewalk. Or I'll get people to call you if you want, because I know it's more than just me that wants this. And if there's 3 people that don't, you know, and that's not the thing that's going to work for them and for me, we've got to be able to find something else.
Well, I think at the end of the last time I saw you when we briefly talked about this, you're correct. I did tell you it would be helpful if there were an outcry of people that needed a sidewalk on that street.
Mm-hmm.
I think also the city commission has to consider the impact on the 3 people that live there.
Mm-hmm.
It will change the landscape of that area. And, you know, for my purposes, people may have told you that they have called and said something, but Jay, I'm telling you, I have never heard one person raise this. I've worked here for, you know, a number of years.
I believe you.
I do think that helps. I think that matters. That
I've
if
seen
there are
it
3
happen with
residents
stop
that don't
signs
want
and
it, and
Basketball nets and everything else, so I know.
exactly.
So okay. I
I mean,
appreciate that.
but
I'll
really,
take that
it's-
as an action.
That, all I do is make a recommendation.
Mhm.
This is the governing body, so you are absolutely right to address them. They need to direct me. I don't know what to do with it.
I'm not saying we should impose a sidewalk, whatever the solution is. One neighbor told me just yesterday that, hey, I got the street replaced. I didn't ask for a fire hydrant, but I got one. And they didn't want that, but they don't oppose it either because it prevents their house from burning down.
But that's not true.
Well, I don't know.
No
I
one
can't. I
asks
can't.
for a fire hydrant in front of their
They
house
didn't have
and
one
gets
before,
it.
but they got one. When the street was redone, they got a fire hydrant that they didn't have before.
Yes, that's based on a number of things,
Mhm.
none of which is the resident saying, I want that.
Right. And
Not a
resident-
fire hydrant.
Right. I understand that. but
Did
it
they
was
have a
an
lot of
example.
dogs?
Well, you know, my point is, people say a lot of things,
Mhm.
and that's a classic example. It's like, no, that did not happen. And I know people probably told you that, you know, when you talk to them.
Mhm.
If I may.
I don't have anything from anyone requesting sidewalk on Kimberton, including when we redid the street on Oakdale.
Mhm. And that was another one. When they were redoing the street, I told them we should do this, but again, it's one word here and one word there, and that's
Right.
okay. So if you think that's a good thing for me to do, I'll go up and down the entire street. I'll
Well,
get a list of
ask
names. I'll ask
them.
them to call you.
I don't wanna give
I'll
you
put
direction.
flyers in the doors.
I think you ought to have a meeting with the 3 homeowners that are going to be affected.
I
And
could
sit
do
at a
that.
table with them.
I could do that. That's 3 homeowners. But what about 50 others that want it? Maybe the sidewalk's not the answer, and it's not up to me to determine what
Maybe
the correct answer is.
maybe sitting with you, they'll say yes.
Maybe so, but you know, it comes down to privacy. You don't want it there. I can understand that.
You
But
have talked to them, right?
over Facebook, and I'm waiting. I do
Okay.
want to go speak verbal.
You know, eyeball to eyeball, talking to people works a lot better.
Yep, face to face.
Jade, I gotta tell you, I was totally in support of the sidewalk when we talked about safety issues with your child and walking the school bus, and now all of a sudden the issue has changed from your child walking down the street now to walking down with your dog, and I mean, I sympathize with the issue, but I mean, the perspective now has changed. I mean, if it's an overwhelming demand and the residents come to us and say, you know, something like, we'll have to review it, obviously.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, because that's what we're here for, is to respond to community's needs. But I mean, originally, that's, you know, maybe I mistook what your presentation was all about, but I thought it was all about safety for your child. And I thought, you know what, I don't care what 3 residents want. If the kid's gonna be hurt on that street, walking to a school bus, then it's a problem. We looked at traffic information, we have not had any incidents on that street where anybody has been hurt that I'm aware of at all. I mean, could it happen someday? Of course. And would we look terrible if it did? Of course. But I mean, if it's an outcrying demand, I'd be more than glad to review it again.
Thank you. I did bring it up, and I mentioned the school bus, and I may have not
The
mentioned.
school bus was my
I may
takeaway
have not
from that
mentioned everything
conversation.
because I
Yeah,
come up and
mine
I'm
too.
nervous and I
Well,
don't
no, I
say everything I
understand, we
want
all
to
do.
say. So that was my example of a personal example. This is me, just Jay Foreman, but I'm not the only guy that lives right there. And I see
Yeah.
people up and down all day long,
Yes.
dachshunds, every kind of dog you can imagine, walking in that street. And it's definitely not a safe thing. So there's got to be an answer for it.
But we haven't had a problem, though. I mean, I want to get
one
to
day I
you
talked to Senator Kid got hit on his bike
Uh,
crossing it, but you know that's okay.
Right, well, that's not okay.
Things
I
do
mean, you
happen.
know, I mean, but
But I would hate for someone to get run over or anything, and we brought this up and nothing has happened because of it, because a few people wouldn't want a sidewalk. Whatever it is, if it's not a sidewalk, if it's a curb in the street or some other
well, we
alternative.
mentioned you before about spacing off an area, and you didn't find that very well. Did we not talk about
I
marking off an area? And
walk, well, if there's paint on there, is that really going to prevent a car from hitting me more
so
as much as a
your
curb
option
would?
is sidewalk or nothing, then, really.
Maybe a curb there to make the street more narrow or whatever it is. I'm not a master of that type of thing.
Well, if we also look at the city as a whole, I mean, we are a sidewalk city. You know, every place, there are 2 spots in this whole city that aren't covered by sidewalks. And
Where's the other one?
The other one's over by the DPW. There is a small, it's between Maywood and
Yeah.
Amherst.
Where
and-
the Quonset hut used to be.
Yeah. And so what happens is that's when everybody's in the street. And I actually was riding my bike over near the Kemberton situation, and there were 3 sets of people in the street walking, you know, dogs or just themselves or whatever. And it is, you know, I mean, sidewalks are one of the important things that I think makes Pleasant Ridge the community that it is, where, you know, we're all very friendly, we're neighbors, we're very, you know, community minded. And it's because it is so simple to go out and take a walk. And, you know, and I feel I can see, you know, some of your point where it cuts Maywood off a little bit down at that end because it's a little bit harder to connect. Maplefield, I'm sorry. Where I think it is, I mean, I see it as an inconsistent part of our landscape, where I think it's, you know, it's sort of, gosh, I can't remember, there's a great architectural term that I can't remember what it is, but it doesn't conform to what it's non-conforming. So, I mean, I don't know if I can ask the city commission to direct the city manager to follow up on a traffic study for a sidewalk to be installed there. And, so on that portion of Kemberton that connects Maple Field and Oakdale.
Do you
And
think
ask
we
you
have
to go
enough,
back around.
do you think we have enough traffic information
Amherst.
ripping
between
up the
alley and
sidewalk on your
Woodward.
street?
That's right.
I've already paid for my blocks, all I know. Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for that. I've been negligent in my part of it too, and speaking to my neighbors, and that's something I need to take care of myself as well.
Well, we're
So,
doing a traffic study now, so.
Thank you very much.
And Jay, we clearly came away with the idea that the majority of the concern was the bus stop, and that's why the school district was contacted.
Mhm. Thank you for that. That's great. I appreciate it.
Any other items? City manager's report.
Most of the items that I had listed, Mayor, have been mentioned. One was the recommendation by the Planning Commission to take no action on the outdoor works of art. I did discuss this with the resident that brought it to my attention and told her she has another option, and that is to address the City Commission. So that may come back to your attention soon. I would like to remind everyone that there is a public hearing on the polar environmental issue next 2 weeks. It's September 27th. There is an informational session that starts at 6, that goes till 7, and the public hearing begins promptly at 7. I encourage everyone to attend. And you can also,
Did you say that was at the high school?
it will be held at Ferndale High School, that's correct. And we have information at City Hall on how you can submit your comments, questions ahead of time. So we are currently in the time frame where the MDEQ will accept comments from the public or questions if you are unable to attend. So please do that if you're in the listening audience.
And the information from the 6 o'clock portion, is that coming from Polar or is that coming from MD?
MDEQ.
Okay.
So.
Sherry, excuse me.
Oh, it's okay.
I would just emphasize how important it is for our residents to attend this meeting. And my opinion on it is not only should you attend, but you should also take a moment in the next couple weeks in the lead up to this meeting to contact them with a written concern regarding this incident that happened last December. We really need to have a strong voice as far as individual neighbors. And one thing I've learned working with Sherry in communicating with the MDEQ is that office really doesn't respond unless there's bulk involved, and the action that I've seen on this issue is really due to citizen response to the incident last December. So this is a crucial part of that whole process. Written communications on this issue can be submitted at the DEQ State Michigan website under Submit Comments for Polar Environmental Services Permit application, and I would highly encourage all residents to do that in addition to making a date on your calendar for September 27th at the high school. So.
Jay?
I will.
Jay?
Please
Jay?
quickly summarize 10-second version of December.
Sherry, you want to give the 10-second version of
There
December?
was an incident that occurred in December of last year, and there was an accident, if you will, at the Polar Environmental Site.
There was a
which-
release in the
and
environmental
there was a
test.
release in the environment. It permeated the entire area. There were residents all the way up to Birmingham.
I
as a
talked to people
result of
miles
that.
away who smelled it.
Yes, the Polar work threw us off.
Polar was working under the MDEQ without a permit.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, the MDEQ has decided that they need to operate under a permit. I'm not exactly sure what benefit that is, because I thought there would be far more restrictions if you had a permit for these companies. What I understand and was told about a month ago is it really doesn't. The MDEQ is not required to make inspections of these properties.
As I
although they
recall,
have.
somebody went home and didn't throw a switch, or a switch malfunctioned, or some such.
He fell asleep.
Fell asleep?
Yep.
Okay.
So,
Sleep at the switch.
it's really important if you can go or
Don't
make a
quit your day
comment.
job.
I will tell you, let's see, have all been talked about. Another reminder is just that the public hearing for the liquor license will be held on the 24th at the community center at 7 o'clock. The DDA concert we talked about. Oh, and I will inform you a little bit about the sidewalk pilot program that we recently did. There were 2 streets identified for a pilot program. It's called a concrete shaving method. It is not grinding. It's a fairly new on the market kind of procedure. And we met with this company. They chose the 2 streets and they went out and eliminated all trip hazards on those streets. I think there were 108.
There were some on my block that didn't because they were probably too high for that technique.
The nice part of working with this company is that they will identify those sidewalk flags that are beyond the scope of shaving off a trip hazard and recommend that the city replace those sidewalk amounts. Another project that I'm looking at and have started discussing with the city commission is a program that one of our neighboring community offers where residents are asked to pay a fee. It is added to your tax bill once a year. That particular community, it's a $25 per year cost, and if you pay that, the city's able to generate enough money or an amount of money to replace an area of sidewalks every year. So that's something that the city commission is going to have to consider whether or not to ask residents if that's a way that they would like to approach a continuous sidewalk replacement program. Residents would not bear the cost then, any additional cost other than your $25 to $50 a year for replacing a sidewalk. So it's pretty interesting, and I felt like it was worth exploring. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Emergency sirens?
Emergency sirens. This is the test month. Is that what you
This
mean?
is the test month. The county was doing some sort of update, so I think it may have been on Tuesdays. There's going to be periodic times during the month by locale where they've done something where the emergency sirens will go off, not Saturday at 1 o'clock. It's going to be Wednesday at 3:30, but for a very short period of time. It's like 30 seconds. So if you're here for 30 seconds this month on a weekday, don't worry. You're here for 2 minutes, duck and cover. Other business.
Mayor, if I could, I would like to take this opportunity to applaud the residents in attendance tonight who stuck this commission meeting out. I really feel like participating in our democracy is important, and I thank you for putting in the time.
What are you saying about those people who left before Sherry's report?
Well, obviously they don't believe in democracy. But I also want to thank Adrian Stone. He was the young gentleman who helped Ted Zachary out on the camera tonight. I also think getting kids aware of the government, their local government, is very important. And I know he was very excited to come tonight. And I thank Ted for letting him work the controls. He had a smile on his face, and it was really cool to see. The last thing I have, and this would be a topic for discussion with Sherry, and I would like to have this discussion with the City Commission. Tonight we approved an operating opportunity for Mrs. Crutchfield at Cork for Sunday business. We also scheduled the public hearing for the Fields Art Studio liquor license. I'm a neighbor and a friend of Sean and Jessica McCarthy, who own Maze in Pleasant Ridge, and they are also in the process of applying for a liquor license. That process has been held up for a requirement based on the application. And as a commissioner who wasn't on the commission during the last liquor license application, I just wanted to work out why that the requirement for medical records is included as part of the application process for a liquor license. Now I know we talked to Mrs. Crutchfield tonight about her plans for Sunday. In no way did I feel the need to investigate her medical records to make a determination of whether she should be able to operate on Sundays. And I feel that the requirement to provide that information on a liquor license seems extreme. Now, I'd love for this to be an opportunity to explain why that's necessary.
I can absolutely repeat our conversation that we had prior. And I'm not real comfortable talking about this too deep at this level. But I will tell you that the application has not been held up. The application is incomplete and cannot be processed. The owners have been told this, informed this by me and by the city attorney. The application for a liquor license was developed by the city administration in consultation with several attorneys, one being a liquor license specialist. There is a reason for to request some medical information. I certainly understand the concern by an applicant to submit that kind of information as so personal and so confidential. It is never submitted to the city. It is submitted to the city attorney and therefore never becomes a public document. And the owners are aware of this. 2 liquor licenses have been approved. Both of those applicants met the requirements of the application.
Got two approved, one
Two,
approved.
one
I'm sorry.
approved, 2 applied for.
Yes, have been accepted and moved forward, I should say. Both of those applicants have met the criteria of the application. So I would not recommend that the city make an exception at this point to allow someone to submit a partially complete application and move forward.
I agree with you
And that's
entirely.
based on our city attorney's advice.
I agree with you entirely, and per our previous conversation, I am not asking for special consideration for that for Mays. I'm just questioning why that information is required.
Okay, let's assume someone's medical records indicates that the person that's going to be employed there, or the person who owns it, and please know I'm not saying this in any direct, connection to what we currently have on file.
Mhm.
But let's say the medical records show a diagnosis of alcoholism or drug abuse. Don't you think that's an important thing that you should consider before issuing a liquor license to that person?
So would this governing body be able to access those medical records? And I guess that's where I come in as somebody who's really preparing to make decisions on these liquor licenses. Will I be able to look at Mr. Perlman's medical records?
No.
So then why is it?
You'll get a recommendation.
Well, that's why you have a
City
city
attorney.
manager
That's
and a
right,
city
city
attorney.
attorney.
That is within the scope and purview of the city administration. You being a legislative body,
Mhm.
you would not be asked or expected to look at any kind of document.
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I understand your dilemma, Jason. I totally do. But I was part of that, and part of that process of going through and meeting with various attorneys, and it wasn't just a thought that just came out of the sky that we should request this. I mean, this was something that we hired a special liquor license attorney to come in here. That's all he does, and that was one of his first recommendations. And so far, we've had one of the active restaurants now have completed that process. It has not been an issue, and I don't see why it should be an issue with anybody. I mean, it's submitted to the attorney. It cannot be FOIA'd, so it's private information. The information then goes to the attorney. And I'm not, as far as I'm a city commissioner, I wouldn't be willing to change it. I mean, part of the reason I felt comfortable as opening up the liquor license is because we had such a staunch process and that they had to go through, and not just a staunch process, but then you can see what Mays has to go through to change even their hours of operation. And I mean,
Cork.
Cork
Right.
has to change their hours of operation, and that was part of the process that I wanted as a city commissioner, because I didn't want the owner to say, well, I'm going to decide to open on Sunday, and I'm excited to have unlimited liquor on noon, and And I thought it was a good process, and I sure didn't mean it to be a detriment to anybody as far as my theory of why we went
Right.
through this process. And that's all I can tell you. I mean, you know.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, having that background, you know, and, you know, I am neighbors, you know, this is a concern.
Sometimes you have to separate that.
And
That is one of the most difficult parts of this job,
Right.
is sometimes you have to separate that. And sometimes your neighbors that were your best friends may no longer be your best friends.
Well, it's one of the experiences that I am, and I appreciate you making note of that, because it has been a challenge for me to kind of wear those two hats, you know, and I applaud, you know, the city commissioners who have been able to do that.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It becomes tough. One thing you said, though, you made a comment about court tonight. The reason they didn't have to submit any more type of applications because their permit already allowed them Sunday. We're the one that stopped it. Because in the contract we wrote, as Jerry said, the contract was extremely restrictive. And that was the reason we all agreed to it. She had to agree to a lot of things that most people probably wouldn't agree to. Because we wanted it restrictive, and she had to come back to us because we don't want people just making changes and doing things.
Right.
So you have to follow a procedure, and everybody has to follow that procedure.
Right.
That's the way we should do it. If we get a special exception to your friend because they're your friend, then what about the next person?
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize for the record, I'm not asking for any exemptions for Mays. I'm just questioning.
No, I'm just saying.
Right.
You can't do that.
I'm just questioning the reason for having the medical requirement on the application. That's
Because,
not
as Jerry
not
said, the
asking for-
attorney that was one of his strongest points. You need to do this, and he gave us all, and that's all he does. And I was also part of that process, and you must do these things if you want to have somebody apply for a liquor license. And so we agreed to it, and we put court through it very rigidly, and we think we should do that to everybody.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you, and I appreciate the discussion, and I appreciate you know, the frank discussion on you know, wearing those two hats. I will take that to heart for sure. But I did feel, as my role as commissioner, you know, there was a purpose to kind of investigating for my own benefit the process, and that's why I brought it up this evening. And I appreciate the discussion.
And sometimes, as commissioner, you're the judge. When you vote to grant or deny a license, you can't be an advocate running right up to the vote. You gotta stay impartial. You have to stay out of the fray. It's kind of like the zoning board of appeals. You can't be dealing with somebody about the house as you're about ready to decide whether they get a variance. You can't be representing them in their negotiations with the city manager, officially or unofficially, and then being one of the 5 votes as to whether they get a variance. It's a quasi-judicial position at that point.
My only question on the medical was that it seems like it is not a common practice with liquor licenses from other friends who I have who are attorneys who have done a lot of business law, that the medical requirement seems like a unique.
I do a lot of business law. I do none liquor control commission law. So talking to a business lawyer who says I do a lot of
Someone
business
who's done many liquor license, helped people get them.
Our LCC lawyer was John Carlin, does nothing else, and you would find it hard to find anybody more respected in the state in that position.
Okay, thank you.
Jerry? No, any other business. We
Okay, yeah,
can
I
walk
should-
off this topic.
I'm just
We
saying.
should maybe we should walk off it, because I'm real confused here. Why is there such a big question here? I don't understand. I mean, if this has been work for us and all of a sudden because.
I think we've all stated our
Okay,
positions
okay,
and answered.
I'll
Yes, sir.
let it go.
Brad Scott, 6 Devonshire here. Just a quick comment.
Gotta be at the microphone.
My perspective is that when we bring people onto Woodward, we're basically hiring them to represent the city. So we want to hire the best businesses to represent our community. And if we were a company, we would certainly run a drug test and a medical examination before we hired them in 2012. If you're a company over 50 people. So that is something that I would expect this commission to expect of anyone that we hire to represent us on Woodward, whether it's somebody that's been there for a long time, or somebody opening up a new restaurant slash bistro slash bar hut, whatever it'll be. And the Fields building, that's what I would expect. That's what I would hope the commission would do for us as residents.
Mike Berry, 57 Oakdale. I guess my comment on the subject is I understand what Commissioner Rubino has said, you know, and about following the rules and following the application process. But at the same time, even if it was an alcoholic, you know, filling out the application and going for a liquor license, they still have to follow the rules. Secondly, I think in regards to your comment, sir, I agree that we need to have, you know, the most respectable businesses, you know, supporting, you know, and representing our community. However, you know, being a CPA and, you know, working in all sorts of different environments, I've never had to provide my medical records for any job. Yeah, drug tests, some of that nature maybe, but never a full medical record. I think that could potentially cause discrimination at some point. And then finally, Commissioner Krzyzak, sorry to...
No, that's very close. Thank you for making that.
I don't really know if your question was necessarily answered as to why. I know that you had stated that, you know, you've talked with other attorneys who put together all the verbiage, but there was no explanation, you know, legal explanation of what the attorney was trying to accomplish. So I'm wondering, is that something that we could do?
I think
Have
Sherry
a little more
outlined that
detail
part of what
behind
is
that.
trying to be determined is whether there are alcohol-related diagnoses in the medical records.
But even if so, they'd still have to follow the rules just like any other.
You can't get a
applicant.
liquor license with a DUI conviction. You'd
Well,
still
I-
have
I
to
don't
follow
know
the
that.
rules,
I've
but you
never
can't
tried,
get
but-
it.
Well, that's just something I wanted to point out. So,
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Any other business?
I have two very quick things. I've
Keyword
had
quick.
requests on the alley for potholes to be filled on the alleys between on the east side between 696 and Kensington and Devonshire.
Yep, thank you.
Pretty pleased before winter. And then someone had suggested something that I think could be beneficial is right at Oakland Park Boulevard, heading eastbound at the stoplight, having a turn lane, just a stripe.
The police looked at that, I can tell you with all assurity, that is not going to happen.
Okay.
It is absolutely not recommended by safety authorities.
Oh, okay.
And if you want, I'll put it in the memo this week about it.
Okay.
But it was brought to the police attention, I want to say Commissioner Perry, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And someone said there's enough room there that if I pull over into the middle of the intersection, that could become a right turn lane. It's a hazard,
Okay.
so.
Because I always pull left because I'm
I
gonna
do
go
too.
I know,
I
I
always
know.
try to give them room too.
You probably shouldn't, it's just
Right.
no different than the turnaround.
Right, no, I
They're
understand
plenty
that.
wide for 2 cars,
Mm-hmm.
but
Well,
legally
doing it
you
and
could be
putting the lane there
ticketed.
is 2 different.
Oh.
That is a 1-lane
Becomes a
turnaround,
liability issue then.
so.
So, okay,
will
so the
follow up with you.
stoplight, do
I got one
not
thing.
pull
Oh,
towards
No, you
the
should
center
just stay in the
straight.
center of the lane, not over
Because I'll get a
here,
ticket.
in front of,
No,
you're
no.
not gonna get a ticket.
I have one other item, and that goes back to Commissioner Krzyzak's initial comment 3 hours ago. Amy, when you go back through the records on the memorial fund for Matt, we probably did have something that included the account number. I would prefer not to see the account number set forth in the minutes. Anybody who goes to the bank and says, I want to make a contribution in memory of this person, they're going to find the account without having to have the account number in our minutes. Any motions to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, aye.
Thank you, everyone, for hanging out.